Roberto Calvi hung beneath Blackfriars Bridge with bricks in his pockets, cash missing, allies gone, and the Vatican's name drifting through the case like smoke. At first, police called it suicide. Many never bought that. Because Calvi wasn't just another banker. He was tied to a Catholic financial network already drowning in fraud claims and whispered mafia links. That's the question here. How does a bank built for God's work end up in stories like this? And not just once, again and again. To understand the London scandal, the leaks, and the trials, you have to start with the machine itself. Because this bank was built differently from almost every other bank on earth. The Vatican is a church, but it's also a state. That sounds like a small detail. It isn't. It means the Holy See carries spiritual authority over more than 1 billion Catholics, while also enjoying the legal protection of sovereignty. So when trouble starts, investigators don't just run into a finance department. They run into walls of diplomacy, internal law, and a system built to answer inward before it answers outward. That strange setup matters because the Vatican Bank, formerly the Institute for the Works of Religion, never worked like a normal neighborhood bank. It doesn't hand out mortgages. It wasn't built for ordinary customers. On paper, its job was simple: hold and move money for religious orders, clergy, and church works. A place for mission money, charity money, money meant for the church's global operations. But then, inside that narrow mission, secrecy grew into habit. The roots go back before 1942 to a financier named Bernardino Nogara. He wasn't a priest, he was a dealmaker, and he understood something the Vatican had learned the hard way over centuries. Faith alone didn't pay bills, defend power, or protect the church in a violent century. After the Lateran settlement gave the Holy See major compensation from Italy in 1929, Nogara got broad freedom to invest that money, and he invested everywhere: in property, industry, banks, and foreign markets. Not like a monastery guarding donations, more like an investor trying to survive chaos and come out stronger. It turns out that model changed the culture. Church money stopped behaving like a reserve for worship and charity and started behaving like a tool. Something to move, something to place quietly, something to shield. Nogara often worked through holding companies and layers that kept Vatican fingerprints off the deals. That wasn't illegal by itself, but it created an instinct that would last for decades. Keep control close, reveal little, trust insiders. Then came the Vatican Bank in 1942. Inside Vatican City, protected by its own legal world, it had unusual freedom. No public shareholders, no market pressure to publish the kind of full outside-facing picture people expect from commercial banks. No normal tax structure. And because it served a religious state, outsiders often had only a partial view of what money moved where, for whom, and why. Few people realize that opacity doesn't need to be criminal to become dangerous. It just needs to be normal. That's what made the place so unsettling. The official purpose sounded clean. Sometimes it probably was clean. But the design rewarded silence, and silence attracts people who need it. If a system answers mostly to itself, the line between privacy and concealment gets thin fast. And once that line blurs, the next step doesn't need to come from the institution alone. It can come from the men who see what this kind of bank can do. The men who stepped into that system weren't cautious caretakers. They were operators. First came Michele Sindona, a Sicilian lawyer turned financial fixer who built his name helping wealthy clients move money, dodge taxes, and, according to later investigations and court findings, work through channels tied to mafia cash. He looked useful to the Vatican because he could do something priests and bishops usually couldn't: move money fast, quietly, across borders. That talent bought trust. In the late 195s, Sindona helped raise funds for a church project with stunning speed, and inside the Vatican that kind of efficiency mattered. He wasn't seen as a gangster in a dark alley. He came dressed as a modern banker, connected, polished, fluent in the language of international finance. Imagine being in their shoes. You run a global church. Governments watch your money. And this man seems able to solve problems in a day. So they let him in. Then there was Archbishop Paul Marcinkus, the towering American cleric who rose to lead the Vatican Bank. Marcinkus didn't come from high finance. He came from the church. But he wanted the Vatican's money operations to grow, and that meant leaning on men who did understand the darker corners of banking. That move would later prove costly. Instead of building a system he fully controlled, Marcinkus leaned on Sindona and then on Roberto Calvi, a banker at Banco Ambrosiano, a major Catholic-linked bank in Italy. Calvi saw the opening right away. Banco Ambrosiano and the Vatican Bank built a close relationship through offshore companies and foreign affiliates, especially in places with lighter oversight. The arrangement let money travel in ways that were hard for outsiders to follow. Some of that was sold as smart international finance. Some of it, according to later court findings and investigators, covered hidden losses, sham transactions, and money flows that may have included mafia funds. The details still get argued over. The pattern doesn't. By the late 197s, Sindona's empire had already started to crack. His Franklin National Bank in the United States collapsed. Italian authorities moved against him. So Calvi stepped into the vacuum. He tightened his grip on the offshore network and got even closer to the Vatican side of the operation. For a while, it worked, or at least it looked like it did. Money kept moving. The institution kept breathing. The story held together. But then Banco Ambrosiano collapsed in 1982, and the hole was enormous. About $1 billion had gone missing through a maze of foreign companies and false accounting. Calvi fled Italy with a fake passport, terrified and desperate, because he knew too much and owed too many people answers. Days later, London woke up to one of the strangest death scenes in modern financial history. Roberto Calvi, hanging beneath Blackfriars Bridge. Police first ruled it suicide. That never sat right. There were bricks in his pockets. Questions piled up about how he got there. Later courts concluded he had been murdered, though no final story ever settled the case for good. Mafia involvement was long suspected. Others pointed toward Calvi's blackmail threats and the fear that he might expose powerful allies. The question isn't what they did. The question is, who needed him silent most? And then the Vatican did something telling. It denied legal responsibility for Banco Ambrosiano's collapse, but still paid $244 million to the bank's creditors in 1984, describing it as recognition of a moral involvement. Not legal guilt, moral involvement. Think about that. An institution built to guard religious money had become linked, in public, to one of Europe's dirtiest banking disasters. Sindona didn't last much longer either. After extradition to Italy, he died in prison in 1986 from cyanide poisoning after drinking coffee. Another central figure gone, another ending wrapped in suspicion. By then, the damage was done. The Vatican Bank's reputation had already been dragged into fraud, offshore schemes, and death. And the next blow wouldn't come from a banker on the run. It would come from papers, whispers, and panic inside the Vatican itself. You might think a scandal like Calvi's would force a clean break. It didn't. The names changed. The pressure changed. The style changed. But the deeper problem stayed alive, because secrecy had never really left the system. It had just learned how to survive in a newer age, one with regulators, leaked emails, digital records, and reporters who could connect dots much faster than they could in the 197s. By the time Pope Benedict XVI led the Church, the Vatican was already under strain from more than one direction. There were long-running fights over finances, fights over authority, and growing demands from outside Europe for the Holy See to meet modern anti-money laundering standards. Inside the Curia, that pressure created fear. Not abstract fear, real fear. Because reform meant someone's books would get opened, someone's contracts would get checked, and someone's quiet arrangement might stop being quiet. Then came VatiLeaks in 2012. Confidential letters and memos began surfacing in the Italian press. They pointed to bitter internal struggles and complaints about inflated contract prices inside the Vatican administration. The leaks made the place look less like a united holy government and more like a court full of rival camps. One senior church official, Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano, had already warned about corruption and overpriced contracts before being moved out of his Vatican role. Those claims hit harder once private papers started spilling into public view. The most humiliating part was who got blamed. Not a foreign spy, not a veteran fixer, the Pope's own butler, Paolo Gabriele. Vatican police found confidential documents in his apartment, and in October 2012, he was convicted of theft and sentenced to 18 months. Gabriele insisted he acted because he saw evil and corruption and wanted to push the church back onto the right path. Whether people believed him or not, the image was devastating. Even the Pope's household had become a leak point. At almost the same time, the outside world was losing patience. The US State Department listed the Vatican as a jurisdiction of concern for money laundering. That wasn't just embarrassing language in a report. It was a public warning that the Holy See's financial system still looked risky to American officials. Then Italy's central bank blocked electronic card payments inside Vatican City because of compliance failures. Think about that for a second. The heart of the Catholic Church couldn't process card payments properly because its financial controls weren't meeting expected standards. That kind of moment strips away ceremony fast. Pilgrims buying museum tickets, tourists using cards, daily operations grinding into a technical mess, all because old habits had collided with a banking world that now demanded documentation, monitoring, and traceable flows. You can see how the problem had grown past one dead banker or one rogue dealmaker. This was a whole structure struggling to live in daylight after years spent working behind closed doors. And then, just when it seemed like the scandal had shifted from murder mystery to bureaucratic dysfunction, a new deal came into view. No bridge, no body, no coded Cold War backstory, just a luxury property in London, bought with money tied to the Vatican's mission, and a paper trail that would drag the whole story into court again. The London deal began with money that carried a moral promise. Some of it came from Peter's pence, the collection Catholics around the world give to support the Pope's mission and charitable work. Ordinary people drop that money into parish baskets, thinking it might help disaster relief, struggling churches, or the basic work of the Holy See. Instead, part of it ended up tied to a luxury real estate investment in one of London's most expensive districts. The building sat at 60 Sloane Avenue in Chelsea. It had once been a Harrods warehouse, and the pitch sounded respectable enough. Prime location, redevelopment upside, stable property value, global city. Church officials in the Secretariat of State entered the investment through a fund managed by Italian financier Raffaele Mincione. Around 2013 and 2014, roughly $200 million from the Secretariat went into the arrangement. From inside the Vatican, this looked like a polished financial play, the kind of deal people defend in conference rooms with spreadsheets and quiet confidence. But then the relationship soured. The Vatican wanted out of Mincione's fund and wanted direct control of the property. That should have been difficult. It turned into chaos. Buying out one complicated structure meant walking into another with more intermediaries, more fees, and more chances to lose control over what was already theirs in economic substance. This is where the deal stopped looking like a bad investment and started looking like a trap built from paperwork. A broker named Gianluigi Torzi entered the picture during the move to full ownership. His role became one of the most explosive parts of the case. The Vatican believed it was taking control of the building. Instead, the shares were structured so Torzi held voting control, which gave him leverage over the asset while Vatican money remained on the line. Imagine being in their shoes for a second. You think you're finally simplifying the mess, but the deal is written so another man can still squeeze you. That's exactly what prosecutors later argued happened. The Holy See eventually paid Torzi millions of euros to surrender control. By then, the damage had spread far past one payout. There were allegations of inflated valuations, hidden conflicts, irregular commissions, and officials signing off on arrangements they didn't fully understand. British court findings published in 2025 later backed the view that the Vatican had been deceived by Mincione in the transaction. That ruling matched the core claim Vatican prosecutors had already pushed in their own case. The Secretariat of State had not entered a smart investment and then simply gotten unlucky. It had walked into a damaging scheme. And this is what changed the feel of the scandal. In the Calvi era, so much lived in shadows, offshore entities, and dead ends. Here, the story exploded in the age of document seizures, raids, internal testimony, and courtroom records. Vatican gendarmes raided offices in 2019. Officials were suspended. Investigators followed contracts, invoices, recorded messages, and internal approvals. The scandal became recent, specific, and hard to wave away as old rumor. Cardinal Angelo Becciu became the highest-profile church figure caught in the fallout. He had served as the substitute in the Secretariat of State during much of the period when the investment was set in motion. Prosecutors tied him to parts of the wider affair and later charged him with financial crimes. In December 2023, a Vatican court convicted Becciu and several others in the financial trial linked to the London deal. Becciu denied wrongdoing and appealed, but the verdict itself mattered. It told the world this wasn't just another cloud of suspicion hanging over Vatican finances. It had become a criminal case ending in convictions. And the ugliest part wasn't the building, it was the source of the money. Because once people understood that donations given in trust had been funneled into a luxury property gamble, the scandal landed differently. This wasn't some distant treasury reserve. This was the money believers gave believing it served the church's mission. Instead, it disappeared into consultants, financiers, legal battles, and losses. So the London deal did more than expose one failed transaction. It showed that even after decades of disgrace, the same habits still had room to breathe inside the system. So why does this keep happening? Not just once in the age of Calvi, then again in the age of leaked memos, then again with a luxury building in Chelsea. The easy answer is greed. Sometimes greed was part of it, but that answer is too small. The deeper problem sits in the structure itself, because the Vatican handles two kinds of power at the same time: moral authority in public, private financial control behind closed doors. When those two worlds drift too far apart, people inside can start treating sacred money like institutional capital, and institutional capital like something that must be defended no matter how ugly the methods look from outside. That split creates a very specific weakness. Clerics often aren't trained financiers, so they rely on lay experts, brokers, fund managers, lawyers, and fixers who speak a language they don't fully master. The relationship starts with trust. It almost always starts with trust. A Monsignor needs a deal done. A cardinal wants funds moved. An outside advisor arrives with confidence, contacts, and polished explanations. And because the institution prizes loyalty, once that advisor gets inside the circle, oversight can shrink fast. Looking back, this was the real turning point in scandal after scandal. Not one evil mastermind, but church officials depending on operators they never fully controlled. Sovereignty adds another layer. In most financial scandals, outside regulators can force records, bring arrests, or apply direct pressure early. The Vatican doesn't sit in that normal lane. It has its own courts, its own legal identity, and a long instinct to defend independence from outside interference. Sometimes that protects religious freedom. Sometimes it protects reputations. And when those two goals blend together, The institution can slip into a familiar reflex: contain the embarrassment first, answer the harder questions later. You can see the pattern across decades. Insiders stay insulated. Warnings come late. Action usually starts only after journalists, prosecutors, or foreign authorities force the issue into daylight. By then, the cost is already real. Money is gone. Records are messy. Responsibility is spread across offices, contracts, and layers of approval that make accountability painfully slow. Few people realize that this kind of fog can protect everyone just enough that no one feels fully responsible, even when the institution as a whole keeps walking into the same kind of disaster. And then there's the money itself. Donations to the Vatican don't feel like ordinary investment capital to the people giving it. A grandmother in Manila, a family in Sao Paulo, a retiree in Chicago. They aren't picturing equity vehicles, voting shares, or redevelopment risk in central London. They think they're helping the church do good. That gap between donor belief and internal financial behavior makes every scandal hit harder. It isn't only about losses. It feels like a betrayal of purpose. Now, to be fair, not every dark story around the Vatican has been proven. The mafia theories around old cases, the full truth of Calvi's death, some of the wider conspiracy claims, those remain disputed in parts. We should keep that line clear. But secrecy, settlements, compliance failures, leaked records, raids, and convictions, those are documented. Those are real. So the question isn't whether every rumor is true. The question is why the same kind of smoke keeps rising from the same place, decade after decade, under different popes and different bankers. Which brings us to the last piece of this story. After all this damage, after the old ghosts and the newer court cases, did Pope Francis actually fix the system? Or did he just keep it from falling apart? Francis walked into this mess knowing the institution couldn't keep running on old habits. Pretty early on, he pushed financial reform as both cleanup and survival. The Vatican Bank began publishing annual reports. Thousands of accounts were reviewed, and many were closed after tighter screening. Oversight bodies gained a louder role. Rules around suspicious transactions got stricter. From the outside, it looked like the Vatican had finally understood that secrecy no longer felt like protection. It felt like proof. Some of those changes were real. That matters. This isn't a story where nothing improved and everybody learned nothing. The bank became more transparent than it had been in earlier decades. Audits and compliance checks became harder to ignore. The Vatican also tried to narrow who could even hold accounts there, which cut down on some of the old confusion about who the bank actually served. For an institution that spent years resisting outside pressure, even that shift was a big admission. The old way couldn't continue. Still, reform arrived while older instincts were still alive under the surface. That's why the London affair hit so hard. It didn't belong to some distant age of offshore shells and whispered alliances. It surfaced during the very era when Francis was trying to prove the cleanup was serious. So even as new rules came in, the scandal showed that culture moves slower than policy. You can rewrite procedures. You can't instantly rewrite how powerful people think, who they trust, or what they believe they can get away with behind office doors. That contrast is what makes the Vatican Bank story stick in people's minds. This is not just another institution that chased returns and got burned. It was built to serve religious works, and yet again and again, it drifted into scandals that look painfully familiar in any system where power is concentrated and scrutiny arrives late. Only here, the moral gap feels wider. A normal financial scandal usually ends with anger. A Vatican scandal carries disappointment too, because the institution asks the world for spiritual trust while struggling to protect financial trust. So, is this the most corrupt bank in the world? Based on proven facts alone, probably not in the simple, measurable sense. There are bigger fraud machines, dirtier criminal enterprises, and banks with broader records of misconduct. But that almost misses the point. The Vatican Bank may be one of the most protected, most opaque, and most disturbing cases in global finance because of what it claims to represent. When an institution speaks in the language of conscience while moving through scandal after scandal, people don't just question the numbers. They start questioning the institution's soul. When a commercial bank breaks trust, customers lose savings, investors lose confidence, and the story usually ends there. When the Vatican breaks trust, something deeper gets damaged, because the asset at risk was never only money. If you want more stories about power hiding behind status, reputation, and sacred language, subscribe now, and send this video to someone who still believes secrecy means innocence.